Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong in the wake of, the perfect play-in result for the Raptors in terms of if somebody only watched one Raptors game all season, somewhere else in the world, maybe not even in Canada, maybe not in North America, if you just somehow turn on your television and your computer and you just watched one game of the Toronto Raptors, that would have told you the entire story of the 2022-2023 Toronto Raptors. So Raptors lose. We're in the studio here. Exit interviews are still taking place. I just scooted over from OVO after Pascal spoke, so I'm not sure what happened afterwards. But Alex, how you feeling, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, man. We're gonna talk about the game today, obviously, and then Nick Nurse had some interesting comments at his end of season availability, so we'll get to that in segment 2. And as Will mentioned, a lot of the other players spoke too, so we'll have some time tomorrow to dive into that as well. But yeah, I was thinking too. A lot of casual fans, especially in the U.S., don't really tune into the Raptors until the postseason, right? And
it's not really possible sometimes, to be honest. We're not on national
television. And sometimes deeper in the postseason. Like, there are a lot of casual fans out there that only know the Raptors this past decade on LeBronto, the Kawhi shot, and the 18 free throws missed last night.
Well, I mean,
which is a pretty funny franchise plot line.
No, our reputation is in the mud. I do feel like that, obviously we definitely, after winning the championship, like had our chests out and we were sort of like walking around with this like swagger and rightfully so, right? Obviously when you win, you win.
My chips with the dip, right? So bring them dips.
So yeah, we were doing that, and then since then I just feel like the reputation has obviously slowly gone away, and I think last night was just sort of like not like the ultimate embarrassment. Like, I do think that they did things well, but I mean, like, come on, the fact that they missed like 18 free throws, which is the most missed in an elimination game since the 60s. Okay,
yeah, since the 1969 finals.
We talking about the Reagan era? Is that even Reagan? That's before Reagan. That's the Nixon era? Are we talking about Nixon? Talking about JFK?
We're talking presidents? No, this is the first time that an NBA team has missed 18 free throws in full HD color. Yeah.
Wow.
So
amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing. That's well done.
Tip of the cap for you. No, the Raptors season, of course, ended yesterday.
We're up 19 as well in the third quarter.
In a season full of these disappointing losses, and I think we've come in here, week after week, running through the list of all the ways that they've found ways to lose games this season. They really saved the most disappointing one for the end. Like, they really did it. They were, like you mentioned, they were up 19 in the third quarter. You walked over to me in the booth. You were like, message Amy Audibert. Let's preview this Raptors Heat game on Friday. I was like, you want Jason Jackson as well?
We said, yeah.
And then
we laughed.
And then Zach LaVine said, we don't need any of that. Yeah, they just fell apart again. Fell apart, missed the free throws.
Emotional damage.
No, honestly.
Fell apart in crunch time. Couldn't make a single play on offense when they needed it. Burned out their starters. Every starter played at least 37 minutes. And Jakob would have hit 40 if he didn't get benched at the end. No bench support at all.
Literally no bench support at all.
No bench support at all. And they went on to lose 109 to 105. No, speaking, let me just read out this bench from last night.
All right, fine, go ahead.
Gary Trent Jr., potentially heading to free agency, 1 of 7 in 17 minutes, did not hit a 3. Precious Achiuwa, 6 points in 9 minutes, a -9. Chris Boucher played 7 minutes, 0 points, 1 rebound. Will Barton came in for 2 minutes there in the second quarter. And I would also add, the 2 big signings and re-signings this offseason was, Otto Porter was a big signing. He ended up being just a disastrous move. Missed the majority of the season.
I think he was at home wiggling his toes and laughing.
Oh, God. And Thad Young, too, right? Like, Thad Young, the team traded for him, brought him back this season, and ended the season with a string of DMPs. It was really everything that we've talked about the Raptors this season. Like, it just all came to the forefront.
You got to do better, fam.
No, like, I mean, again, it's amazing how one game can really accurately depict all the trends that we've been covering on the show for, like, months, right? When you look back on the season, you might say, like, okay, who was the best player? It was Pascal Siakam. You look at the game last night, Pascal was excellent. Excellent. Obviously, the 2 missed free throws at the end there, were devastating, but on the balance of the game, he was amazing. Like really, really amazing, right? And then you saw moments of good from Fred, but then you saw moments of just like terrible from Fred, especially offensively. You saw the in and out offense that involved OG and Scotty, and the times where they were able to capitalize and the times where they weren't. We saw the lack of a bench, right? We saw the fact that the Raptors' defensive schemes eventually got solved, right? We saw that the Raptors in the fourth quarter collapsed. I mean, we did entire episodes on the Raptors in the fourth quarter and their issues, and we went through every single loss and we highlighted it, and you can go back through the archives. And of course, what happens here, it's the exact same thing, right? And I do think it's really poetic how all that came together. And of course, you might say that the Raptors did play well enough to win a game like that. You obviously the Raptors missing 18 free throws is very uncharacteristic. The Raptors are not an elite free throw shooting team, but they're a regular free throw shooting team. They shoot 78% on the season. You make 78% of your free throws, you win this game, right? Obviously, the game doesn't work like that, especially in hindsight. But like that's a huge portion. You did play well enough. Getting to the foul line is like the second best thing you could do on offense, outside of dunking the ball. So you did do that. Your defense was good for the first three quarters, but then the problems start to show up. And I think defensively, it's disappointing when you watch back on some of those highlights. And for me personally, I haven't been able to bring myself up to do it. Also, like media availability was at 10 a.m. So I literally was at Scotiabank. We cried about this, went home, woke up, got back on that scooter, went back to OVO. Like so that's the grind. So I went straight from there to here. So I literally even had time to watch back on it. But when I look through my notes, it's just Zach LaVine beating back and no help coming. I think there's two issues with that. Number one, obviously Zach is a very good driver, and obviously Zach decided in this game, I'm going to not use the jumper as much, right? He did make some jumpers down the stretch, but primarily the damage he did was going downhill. The Raptors' defense all season, we've talked about it, the pressure at the point of attack extended out as high as possible, always pressing up. I'm not saying you got to guard him like Westbrook or guard him like Rondo, but you eventually, when you see the guy's approach is that they're going to attack downhill, you have to give him a little bit of a gap, allow him to drive into you a little bit, cut off his momentum, and then direct him towards help. The point of attack defense of the Raptors all season has been twisted and backwards for me. It's so much gambling. It's so much like pressing up on guys, and it invites blow-bys for everybody. That's why when you look across the board and you see everyone's defensive reputation versus the defensive output as a whole, that's a huge portion of it. You give up dribble penetration, that's one of the worst things that you can do in basketball. And then the second thing is the layer of help for the Raptors was just so late. Like, I'm sorry, but even if you are pressing up at the three-point line, and no matter how athletic Zach LaVine is, clearly we know what he can do. Just look back to 2016 in Scotiabank Arena at the All-Star Weekend. But if someone's getting past the man above the three-point line, you should have all the time in the world to at least close down at the rim. And how many times when you watch back on either the Raptors giving up the fouls or the layups to both him and DeMar DeRozan eventually, did the Raptors not have timely help? And that's disappointing to me. Like, those are principles of your defense that ultimately cratered. It's not just the fact that we had a 10-year-old girl screeching for free throws, which I do think that was an actual element of this game. But I think overall, the Raptors also have themselves to blame for not being able to execute their defense. So that's why so much of the talk post-game and also this morning in the locker room cleanout was just focusing on hammering out those details. And do you need to change those systems? Because to me, it's proven to be their Achilles heel all season. For a team that is built to play well on defense, they don't actually get stops when they need it.
Yeah, no, I think this is a very humbling game and a humbling season, like for the front office, for the coaching staff, and for the players, right? Like, you talk about this attention to detail, you talk about the identity of the team and all of this stuff, and you talk about building good habits through 82 games. Like, we saw these bad habits over and over again that just weren't fixed, and you just couldn't go into a game 83 and expect any different result than you saw the previous 4 months. And I think the most disappointing thing for me from yesterday, and like all due respect to Zach LaVine, who was incredible yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt.
The Bulls aren't even a good team.
No.
The Bulls are not a good team.
No offense, man.
You walk into Philly and you let them shoot 77%. Okay, like, I have an issue with that, but Philly's a great team. Boston, even without all their players, you get blown up by them in Boston. I'm okay with that because that's a different level of team, right? The Raptors like to fancy themselves coming into this play-in tournament as equals to a Chicago, to a Miami, to Atlanta. And what they showed last night is that they were not even at that level. Like they would have been exposed at any point, whether it was yesterday, which they did, or if they won yesterday, they would have gone exposed maybe on Friday in Miami. Yeah. They definitely would have gone exposed in Milwaukee. Like it wasn't even about the opponent yesterday. Like it wasn't about the opponent. No matter who you played, the fourth quarter breakdowns are the fourth quarter breakdowns. The roster flaws are the roster flaws. And I think we talked about this at the trade deadline, and we're going to talk about this now because the season is over. Like the whole organization really needs to take a hard look at everything. And you talk about the players too. Like the players have all this self-belief, and then they always will have this self-belief about how far they can go as a group. But you look at everything last night, like Fred's shot selection in the fourth quarter, right? Yeah. You look at Scotty, there were times when he could have been aggressive in the fourth quarter. And listen, this is a second-year player, but I think we need to be honest too that he's at a particular level in his development curve right now. Like there's a lot that he needs to add to his offensive game, because what is Scotty's go-to move? Like if you are counting on Scotty in these fourth quarter situations, like what is his role on the floor? And you look at Gary coming off the bench, right? You look at OG wanting a bigger role. Like I got to see better than this, right? Like I need to see more consistency on that level. So I think it's very humbling for the players too, like talking about the offseason. Like you got to come back as better players too if you really believe that this core group can work moving forward.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, like the Raptors' talent level isn't so high that they can just like get away with mistakes. The Raptors are fundamentally a team with the way they're built right now. They have to play very hard, and they have to play very together, and they have to limit their mistakes. That's the only way they're going to get results. Obviously, there's a ceiling, and we were going to hit that ceiling whether it was yesterday, whether it was going to be tomorrow, whether it was going to be in the first round. But that was it. We knew there's a clearly defined ceiling, right? But the fact that they tripped over even the first hurdle of that, I think, is very telling. And yeah, I mean, I do think of the play-in. First off, the play-in has to be a huge success. It was actually just a very entertaining game. Period.
Yeah, congrats to the NBA league office.
No, I know Adam Silver is just high-fiving right now.
I know the Mavericks are getting FOMO for taking out of this.
Oh man,
Luka's like, yo, I could have done this.
Luka's like, I could have lost to a 10-year-old girl screaming on free throws. No, but like, I think the play-in tournament has really given a chance to sort of get excited for the playoffs, and obviously like put these like gun to your head moments, right? And so rarely do you see that. And I do think that when those moments happen, this is what I was saying on the show yesterday, I really wanted to see them come out in this game because you can really see who they are. And it turns out we knew exactly who they were, right? Like this is who they are. And, I was thinking about it in terms of just the play-in tournament as sort of like a bailout, sort of like a redemption. Like, yes, you screwed up on the season, but here's this like one last chance. Like typically, for example, in the regular playoffs, format, it's 1-8 and then you go into the playoffs. Raptors wouldn't even have made the playoffs. Just like they didn't make it here, right? But they had the play-in tournament, which actually worked in their favor to try to win their way in, and they just couldn't do it. And to me, it's disappointing because it's not that I don't think they can do it. It's not like I don't think this team can beat the Chicago Bulls. They are beating them for the better part of 3 quarters, and they were playing really good basketball to do it. And so what are the reasons that sort of came apart? Defensively, I thought that was a bigger concern. But even offensively, I did think that they got out of rhythm, and I thought they weren't playing together as much. And again, these are all themes that we highlighted throughout the season. And so all that, plus the free throws, I mean, do we want to quickly talk about that?
Yeah, we'll get to the free throws.
We will? Okay.
I do want to stick on them, just the disappointment of the season, Because
by the way, I enjoy typically on this show, the dynamic is I'm the Asian dad. But now the Raptors have played so poorly and disappointed you so greatly that you have also become the Asian dad.
Like I've said, man.
This is tough. No one should have 2 Asian dads.
Try to tell Raptors PR this too. Nobody wants to be a bigger cheerleader of the team than myself. But also, I gotta recoup some of my credibility too. I gotta be honest, like when the team is not good, like I can't be sitting here and like drawing out all the positives today. Like the season has been the season, and I don't think people want to listen to us if we're coming in here and trying to make excuses for this team.
No, I don't think we ever really do. Right? By the way, I think we, there's reason to be optimistic about the team, and depending on how they show it, you can come with that. But also at the same time, last night was very clear. Like it's really gone through your head, win or go home, and the Raptors went home.
No, listen, my thing is like thinking about it today. And like, I don't know, I guess I did become you yesterday. Like I was having trouble sleeping last night, just thinking back on the season.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just like, I'm more disappointed in game 1 to 82 than last night's game.
Sure.
Really. Cause it's like you look at the whole body of work, right? Like, like we've said, like yesterday's result was going to happen at some point. And I'm just more disappointed that this team came into the season with these expectations, and we looked at these kind of individual areas where they could grow in as a team and as individual players, and like none of it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Like-
not mad.
Like none
I'm
of it.
just disappointed.
Yeah, and none of it happened. I was looking over the season too. You know, the Raptors were a season high 2 games over 500 this season on 3 occasions.
A season high?
5-3, 7-5,
my God.
11-9. And then during
Wow.
the season, they had one single win streak, more than 3 games, a single 4-game win streak.
That's right.
I wonder if you could name me the teams. If you could even name me one of these 4 teams.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they beat Detroit
Yep.
twice?
Yeah. So Detroit, Orlando, New Orleans, and then
Yeah,
Detroit.
yeah, I remember. This
So
is
that was
after
their-
Yak got here. Yeah.
That was their only 4-game win streak.
Mhm.
And they only had one losing streak more than 3 games. So it was a 6-game losing streak in December.
Yeah.
So basically, the Raptors were a 500 team the entire season. They basically spent the whole season either winning 3 straight, losing 3 straight, or in between. And this was what Fred talked about at the end of last night's game too, right? Like it was just up and down,
Yeah.
up and down all season. Like they never found any momentum. And we came in here after the trade deadline. I remember we were talking about how, okay, like front office has made its decision. Masai's talked about the team being selfish. Like you don't need to hear about all the outside chatter about trade rumors now. Now you've added Jakob Poeltl. Like now let's go, right? And I don't think we
But
ever
who
saw
has
that.
ever said that? No offense to Jakob Poeltl, who I very much enjoy interviewing, who I've enjoyed watching on
Yeah.
my favorite team.
Mhm.
But who has ever said, we've got Jakob Poeltl now, let's go?
No, but
No one has ever said that. Do you understand the
Masai said
absurdity of that statement?
But my thing to you is like,
Yeah.
when you sit here now today versus sitting here at the trade deadline, has anything changed for you based on like you looking at this team?
No, I mean, I thought that like Yak coming in wasn't going to be the Band-Aid for this for all their issues. It was going to give them a center. It was going to give them different matchup looks. And, you know, having even talked to Bobby about this, you know, when we did our live show, the idea behind it was just so like we felt like that was a good price to pay for a guy of his quality, which I don't even necessarily disagree with. But at the same time, I don't think it should have been looked at. And I don't think they looked at it as like, this is going to solve all our problems, right? They have problems. Their problems existed before Jakob Poeltl, and they exist with Jakob Poeltl. In fact, last night in crunch time, they didn't even play him.
Yeah.
They threw, Nick Nurse was so desperate. He threw in Gary Trent Jr. ice cold off the bench to play in a defensive matchup. And then it just turns out he was wide open in the corner, and that could have been a redemption for him. You know, that open corner 3 for Gary could have been the redemption for him, just like the playing game could have been the redemption for the Raptors season. But of course he missed it, right? And so, you know, like that, this is just kind of who they are. And of course, I think what we're going to do over the course of this program, tomorrow's episode, when we come back over the weekend, on Monday's episode, Tuesday, we're going to break down like all that sort of went on with the team and sort of like what their own assessments are going to be. We were at, the locker room cleanouts, and we heard Fred speak for 30 minutes, and, you know, we heard Pascal speak for a long time, and we heard Nick talk a lot. And, you know, there's an opportunity, especially at the end of the season. It's not like a regular availability. There's more of a transparency and honesty. And of course, everything is sort of available to be discussed in those moments. And so there were hard questions being asked. There's questions being asked about Nick's future. You know, I asked Pascal about what do you think you can improve in the fourth quarter? And what do you think the Raptors need to improve on in the fourth quarter? I asked Fred point blank, do you feel like you and if Scotty wants to be the point guard, you're the point guard, how do you sort of facilitate that growth? How do you coexist? Right? These are hard questions that you don't typically see asked in the course of just like regular media sessions, because again, there's so much game to game focus. But like, we are going to be able to break all this down, because I think the biggest question on everybody's mind is, where do the Raptors go from here? Like, this was such a, you know, terrible season in terms of being disappointing and being dysfunctional, that we really need to break it down, because what nobody wants to see again is the same thing.
No, and I think of all people, the players should not, the ones that are coming back should not want to see the same thing. And it's like, it's good, like all the stuff that they talked about at this end of season availability, and we'll get to all of that. But it's like, you know, they spent all season talking about this stuff. Spent all season talking about, you know, extra practices, working on habits, all this stuff. Like, it's just time to see it, man. Like, they got to come back, you know, with a brand new approach. But yes, you know, the main storyline from the game yesterday, like you mentioned, the Raptors shot 78.4% from the free throw line during the regular season, and last night they were 18 of 36 from the free throw line. don't even have a single player I can blame on this. I feel like it was just an overall effort.
That's how you know
From the
that
team?
there was an external factor that affected
So
it.
there was
a guy like Fred, he shoots 90% on foul shots, and he split all 3 times he went to the line.
So I think everybody knows by now that it's gone viral that DeMar DeRozan's daughter DR was courtside, sitting with a superfan, and I think you noticed the screaming pretty early on, right? Like
How
in the
could you
arena.
not?
Yeah.
You could hear, and here's the thing: it was loud on the broadcast too. But sometimes what you hear in the broadcast is not necessarily what you hear in an arena. And I'm here to tell you, like, you can't. First off, you can't sit further away from the screaming than where we are. Okay.
Yeah, usually it's just Will screaming.
Well, yeah, that's why we're situated there, so they can't hear me screaming. But like the booth is so far up; it's in the 600s. Very few people even sit in the 600s. I think you need like a Class C like box. Like if you're like an organization, but you're not like a big one, like you might be able to sit in one of those boxes.
A
up
mid
there,
organization
right?
to watch a mid team,
right? So we're in one of those, and we can hear from there.
No, here's the we have a clip here, a sample of what people heard on the broadcast. So here's the clip.
Do this, all right.
Particular game, if he steps the wrong way or something.
Visit to Florida State. Asked me, what did you? Patrick said I was down for whatever Coach Hamilton. Underrated passer, doing a nice job.
In terms of the total number or the quality of shots, I'm comfortable.
Tell me life is really good for him right now. He's in a good headspace coming in.
So
my defense has been sharply lowered.
So DeMar was asked about this after the game, and he said that he did hear some screaming during the game and didn't really notice until I think within the flow of the game that when he looked over that it was his daughter. And he did explain afterwards how his daughter ended up at the game yesterday. Here's what DeMar said.
You know, it's crazy. My daughter called me the other day when she was getting out of school, and she was just, she just said, "Dad, can I come to the Toronto game?" I remember going to all the Toronto games when she was a kid, and I almost said no because she in school back home. She kept asking. She was just adamant about coming to support. And I just said, you can miss one day of school and, come to a game. And I'm glad I did. I owe her some money for sure.
Is she coming, Fred?
No, she got to go back to school. School first.
Oh, no. Hold on.
No, to add insult to injury.
There's nothing you are learning as a 10-year-old in school that is so necessary that you are now going to miss. No, if you're going to influence the play-in, please influence the next play.
DeMar DeRozan needs to learn. Well, is calculus too early for 10-year-old? Yeah. Okay,
relax, Asian dad. No one's ever been more Asian than that statement. My goodness, man.
Reportedly she's not going to
that's not fair.
Miami.
That's not fair. Who's not Bacha out there? Like, get her some tickets.
So there was a lot of avid, investigative journalism that was taking place during the broadcast yesterday. So as everybody knows, Pascal drew the foul late in the game, went to the free throw line, had 3 to tie the game. He makes the first one.
Yep.
There was screaming on the first one.
Yep.
And then apparently DR faked him out and didn't scream on the second one, which he missed.
Yo.
And then she brought the screaming back on the third.
It is actually an ingenious ploy. Like, this is exactly right up my alley. You don't understand. Like, as the game was going on, even when the Raptors are up 15, up 19 or whatever, and you guys were all chilling in the booth, I'm like really intensely locked into every possession. I'm even tweeting out ideas with maybe the potential hope that Game Op somehow sees this in some way. But like, and I talked about this in the postgame show, there's been this thing that's been done all year long for I'm assuming way back to when the franchise
since the
first
very
started.
beginning.
Since the very beginning, it's been sort of done with Herbie Kuhn, the in-arena announcer, where he will say, Pascal Siakam going to the line, shooting two. And the whole idea is obviously there's tons of noise, there's all sorts of loudness or whatever, but everyone's supposed to just go silent as they go shoot free throws. I've always thought that would be a little bit eerie for me personally. But again, obviously I'm not anywhere close to those kind of scenarios. However, when you make it so silent, then it makes the screech even more effective, right? Because at least if there was noise in the background, if like for some reason we started just chanting MVP,
that's even more distracting.
No, I don't think so. Because at least then you won't hear this piercing like hawk come through the air.
I'm helping my guy Herbie beat these allegations.
I'm just saying. I really do think we should reevaluate that portion. I also think that honestly, this whole thing and how ridiculous it's become. Even the reaction, people are saying like we got to toss her out or this has got to be banned. Also, like that's so ridiculous. I think this whole thing, exactly right. I think this whole scenario reminded me of just like fundamentally sports is a children's game that adults play for serious money
that adults
and
lose
other
sleep
adults
over,
get mad about and lose sleep over and lose money over. This is a children's game. at the end of the
That is your
day.
conclusion at the end of the season.
Exactly. How
This
else
is
do you
child's
explain
play.
this? You know, I was explaining this to my partner this morning as I woke up to like go back on my scooter to OVO, and I had like 2 minutes to explain what happened last night, and I was just like, here, look at this clip. And like she was just laughing, you know, her head off over this whole idea because this is really just a game at the end of the day. Like this is what you would do in grade 5 when you are playing for like lunch money. Like you would be doing this. So honestly, all due respect to the DeMar's family, man. That was actually it's very memorable. It's very memorable what happened.
Yeah, I will say too, like, you know, Herbie doing the shush, like at the very beginning, it was because, you know, basketball was new to a huge audience here back when the team started. And that was like a prompt to make sure that they weren't cheering.
Okay.
Like during the thing.
You think we got it after 30 years?
Yeah, you know what? Some people might still need to be educated. I'm Team Herbie on this one. Yeah. I'm Team Herbie, but I get it. Listen,
ultimately,
you know what?
Players have to make the free throws. Like, there's no excuses.
Just make your free throws. Like, you know, Fred and Pascal both were asked about the screaming, and
they were asked about it today.
Yeah, they're very.
Imagine cleaning out your locker for the whole season after being disappointed in the play-in, and people are just being like, "Yo, that 10-year-old girl, did she cause you to lose?"
Well,
like, man,
yesterday they both said, you know, Pascal specifically said that he didn't really hear it. Scotty was asked about it today, and he said, quote, "For sure, it was quiet in the gym. She was yelling. I was trying to figure out who it was. I don't know if it really had an effect. We went 18 for 36, so it had to have an effect somewhat. She did a great job. I think the biggest conclusion from this is just make your free throws. Make your free throws is a non-story.
But again, this is why this thing, thinking back the morning after, is kind of so funny because you have to understand, like, organizations put so much effort and intensity into getting any possible edge, right? We're talking about like they've renovated the entire OVO facility to put in those TVs and those giant monitors with the sophisticated like tracking system that I think used to be used in some sort of warfare, right? Like they use like a weapons technology to get the tracking of the arc of the ball, and they have all the sport view data, and they have like hundreds of people employed. They get paid millions of dollars. These guys work out a ton, and they spend so much effort. And the whole idea is to gain any marginal advantage because of how competitive this whole game is. And one 10-year-old girl sitting courtside screaming would like very likely swung a whole playing game. Again, this is why you have to sometimes sit back and laugh. Like, it really is a joke.
Life is really good for
Oh,
him
my
right
God.
now.
I'm literally hearing this in my nightmares, man.
No, we also need to pull the clip probably for another show of you imitating the screech on the React bot. It was so funny.
I'm also very, very, like, competitive. So eventually, when the Bulls were on to the free throw line, I started screeching from the 600 level in hopes of potentially influencing Zach LaVine to miss foul shots.
Oh, so
unfortunately, I wasn't sitting courtside.
Okay, that was you.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was Joe Wolfond or something.
You know, I'm insane about this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
like this is exactly the type of deviousness that I would come up with.
I'm well aware, man. I need a mood check every time I come to the office. Yeah, no, it's you're right. So maybe instead of the NOAA scoreboard, should they put in the DR system? So then when they're practicing free throws at OVO, you hear a little scream?
I'm not even kidding. Like, I think this should happen because here's the thing, like, especially because it was such a big story and it was obviously on ESPN and it was a huge deal. I think more teams are going to do this.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
This is a one-off thing.
Don't you remember
so you think just a random fan is going to like pull this?
You remember when Giannis was playing the Heat and they started I think Karan Butler started counting down, right?
Yeah.
Just to get the 10-second violation.
Yeah.
Right? And then what happened every single time Giannis went to a different building? They were counting it down. So, like, why not? I mean, we'll see how long the Bulls are in the playoffs, but I do see more replicants of this going on.
Well,
That's just how it is.
You know when it's going to end? When someone tries to do this and the team makes 21 of 22 free throws, and it'll just end. Like, if a team is missing 18 free throws every time because of a fan screeching, then sure.
But again, like, you have to understand the amount of money and investment and time and energy that gets put into all this. And for this to be the game-changing factor. Like, the Raptors lost this game ultimately by 2 points. They were intentionally fouling at the end. So that flipped it to 4 in the final advantage. But they lost this game by 2 points.
No, this is
2 points is huge. It's monumental. We could be here tomorrow, today, in an alternate timeline with no screeching and just being like, hey, that was great. Let's go take down the Miami Heat. Let's call out Jason Jackson. You know what I mean? Like, no, we're not doing any of that kind of stuff. Now we're having this self-reflective talk. And again, it's because we're analyzing a children's game at the end of the day. Like, it is kind of absurd, the whole thing. So
this is the type of story that's gonna go beyond the sports crowd. Like it's so viral that like people who don't follow basketball are gonna hear about this.
Man.
Like, this is a huge story.
Bro, if I go to Ramsden like after work today and go play basketball outside, someone's gonna be screeching at me. I guarantee.
life
man.
is really good for him
my
right
God.
now. He's in a good.
It's the worst drop ever, man. Derek, this is probably what Derek's life is normally because he has like 3 or 4 kids at home. I mean, imagine he hears us. Yeah, he's nodding his head right now.
That's why
He's like, if you can't deal with screeching, then you know.
never have kids.
Yeah.
One last thing before we take the break. Mike Roach, who hosts the podcast Hustle Play
what's
with Chris Boucher. So he tweeted out, he was in the tunnel yesterday after the game, and he tweeted out he saw Pat Bev shout, basically, I knew this team was trash when he was walking off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was within earshot of Bobby Webster, who was also in the tunnel. He just wanted to clarify, because this has been another kind of moment that's gone viral, that Pat Bev didn't say that directly to Bobby. Like, Bobby just happened to be within earshot.
Okay.
Like, he was just running down the tunnel and screaming for everyone to hear. Yeah.
Here's something I've really begun to notice.
Yeah.
When people want to criticize management, somehow people are blaming Bobby. I'm sorry, if you don't even know what Bobby does, why are you blaming him? I know it's because you guys love Masai more. Okay, like if the buck stops with Masai, but somehow we're gonna slander Bobby on every opportunity. I'm sorry. Obviously, we like Bobby. We have a closer relationship to Bobby than Masai, but this ain't fair, man. It really isn't fair.
Yeah,
you guys don't even know how this thing breaks down.
We'll do a Masai Bobby thing at some point.
If you're mad at the management, be mad at the top man. Like, you know what I mean? If you're mad at the Raptors show, are you gonna be mad at me or Alex?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's why I got the best job in the
come
city.
Come at me, man.
Yeah. That's why I got the best job in the city.
This stuff is silly.
Please
man.
don't get mad at me,
Listen,
man. I'm harmless.
The funniest thing, by the way, before we go to break, and the last thing about the screaming.
Yeah.
So typically, what I would do is I'm on the booth, I do the post game show, and then I go home. Okay. Because it was the last day of the season thing, I came down to the vet level to come see the rest of you guys, maybe see the rest of the press conferences. Typically, they're already over as I'm already recording, so there's no point in doing this. But I chose to come down, and I came down the event elevator. I walked through that tunnel in the back, past the team buses, and the first person I see as I round the bend is DR DeRozan.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
She was just there with like some other Bulls players. And I think Thad Young came over to say hi because obviously he was with the Bulls and stuff like that. But the first thing I saw was her in that jacket, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm down so bad."
You should have told her.
I was so shook, man.
You should have told her I wasn't familiar with your game.
I should have screamed. Honestly, I should have screeched at her, man. I'm sorry.
Last thing, do you think Pat Bev even knows who Bobby is? Like, I don't think.
No, of course he knows who Bobby is, man.
You
Are
think
you kidding
so?
me?
You think players recognize like general managers like that though?
Yes.
Really? How many general managers do you think you could recognize if I put up 30 faces right now? Who's the general manager on Memphis?
Zach Kleiman.
Oh, damn it. I think you got that right.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Who's the general manager in Sacramento?
Monty McNair. But he's been talked about a lot this year. That's not fair.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Who's the general manager in Charlotte?
It's not
Don't
Rich
you can't
Cho
say
anymore.
you can't say MJ. Yo, Rich
It
Cho.
is MJ,
Rich
man.
Cho, let's do the Fung Bro show, man. The three of us. We can make this happen. He had a food blog. Everybody
Good,
should
man.
check that out.
He's one of those other guys that has a head like an egg.
Yeah. Anyways,
He's got to hire Jim Boylan.
oh
man.
God, as you're fired up
The
again.
Boylan egg.
Gonna take a break. When we come back, some clips from Nick Nurse's end of season availability, and we'll chat about that.
Yeah. Okay. We are going to take that break. I've been your host, Willow, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu. I continue to be joined by co-host and producer Alex Wong. We will get to more conversations about Nick Nurse's future because he addressed them at locker room cleanout earlier today. I was there to witness some of the exchanges, so I can provide some context as well. But first, you want to quiz me on who are the 30 general managers in the league because you're convinced.
You were coming in real arrogant, being like, yeah, I know all the general managers.
Okay.
So this is sorted in alphabetical order, if that helps you.
No, we're not going to go through all 30 teams.
It'll be quick.
Okay.
Denver Nuggets.
Calvin Booth.
Goddamn. Philadelphia 76ers.
Why am I blanking on this? Daryl Morey, yeah.
Yeah. Indiana Pacers.
Is that still Kevin Pritchard?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this list is not updated. I'm just going to give you like 10. Portland Trailblazers.
Joe Cronin.
Oh, man, you do know.
Yeah.
Atlanta Hawks.
Landry Fields. Yeah,
Orlando Magic.
Jeff Weltman.
Yeah, by the way, Charlotte Hornets was Mitch Kupchak. I believe someone in the YouTube chat.
Of course.
New Orleans Pelicans.
Why am I blanking on this? Oh, David Griffin.
Yeah. Damn it. Washington Wizards.
Tommy Shepard.
Damn, man. Detroit Pistons.
Well, is it now Dwayne Casey, I guess?
But before. Let's say before that.
Who was managing the Pistons? Why am I blanking on this? Oh, God.
All right, you missed one. It's Troy Weaver.
Troy Weaver, yeah, okay.
Damn, okay, never mind. You do know your management.
But you know what? I do hear your point, though. It is kind of hard to, like, recognize some people by face. Because, like, if you told me to pick Troy Weaver out of a lineup, I don't know. I don't know where I would start, man. I actually don't even know, like,
that should
even ethnicity-wise, I was like, that could be anybody, man.
That should be a new All-Star Saturday event.
That's tough, man. Oh, hold on.
Anyways, as mentioned, Nick Nurse
who he managed for is insane.
Nick Nurse and a bunch of players speaking today, and we'll get to some of the players tomorrow, but wanted to focus on Nick's end-of-season availability. One of the main topics that came up, of course, was about his future with the team and the speculation around him going to Houston over the last couple of weeks. So one of the first questions he was asked was, he talked about evaluating his future, 10 years with the organization, back in that infamous presser before the Philadelphia game. And he was asked about what that would entail this summer in terms of evaluating his future. And here's what he had to say.
My job is to make the best decisions for this organization. I've always believed that from day one, and I still believe that 10 years later. That when you sit back and look at it, all the decisions you make have to be for what's best for the organization, right? And I think that we got a front office or a president in Masai who passionately wants to win. And we got a head coach who passionately wants to win, right? That's why we've always been on the same page and have a great level of communication. Like, our goals are to win here, and that takes some evaluation on all fronts.
So I thought that was interesting, and I was thinking about this too in the context of the comments that he made. He could have just said this in Philadelphia. This was a good answer. This was a good answer.
Approaches.
Yeah.
No, I do think it's a good answer. I also think that it's telling that he said, we all have to evaluate that on all fronts, right? So I do feel like, and look, listen, this is what happens at the season end press conference. You get much more like to the point. And I haven't been on the Raptors beat long enough to really understand why. Like, I suppose you can't just pull up on Nick Nurse on a Tuesday before they play the Houston Rockets and be like, hey, what do you guys need more out of on your roster, right? But you do get those types of questions, and I do feel like there was opportunities and invitations almost to essentially critique roster construction, or at least point out some of the weaknesses. And yeah, I mean, I think, he didn't necessarily explicitly say all that, but at the same time, I do feel like, it's got to be a two-way street. And I think that's fair for any coach to say for their team. Like, you can't, like, the coach is like, if the coach is the chef and the GM's job is to, like, provide the ingredients. So you can't really make him cook something that isn't there in the first place. So I do hear the frustration from the coach's perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too, him saying that his job is to make the best decision for the organization, too, right? Because to me, that would hint at, him evaluating whether he's the right coach moving forward, right? Versus just a very straight up of, like, he would like to, continue with his job here. The line of questioning about his his coaching future and the rumors kept coming up. So here's another exchange of Nick addressing some of those rumors.
Toward the end of the season, Adrian's name came up. Do you think conversations around the coaching staff impacted sort of the last couple games?
Well, I don't think so. I think that happened last year. I think it happens a lot, right? I think, you know, from my standpoint, I think, well, let's deal with the assistants first of all, that you can get them up here to talk if you want them to talk about their own, but that happens, that's happened almost every year, right, for 10 years, that some assistants getting named for a job. So I think, again, that's part of the territory. And as from my standpoint, like the speculation of whether I was going to be back or not that started, I have no idea where that comes from, right, or what I was supposed to do about that, right? And what I thought was I needed to try to get the team or any of the players or anybody focused back on the job at hand, right? And try to not have to answer that question every game. You know, started coming one after another, and I was trying to put it to bed, and so we could focus on the season. Again, it's part of it, right? I mean, I think it's part of it. There's lots of teams that go through that, and you got to handle it the way you best see fit, and that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, there's another part of this exchange, but I thought this first part of the answer was interesting. Again, like, you know, Nick talked about that he had no idea where it came from. Like, you know, he was part of driving that narrative.
No, I think what Nick with his narrative, shouts to Nick and narrative.
Oh my God,
shouts to
deep cut.
Yeah, super deep cut. This is for 5 people listening to the Banter Pod. But no, like I think what Nick really wanted to do here was sort of escape all culpability from this whole scenario. In fact, in this telling of the situation, it was Nick trying to throw himself to protect the players and to focus from the media who was creating the outside narratives. Because apparently it was asked game after game. Even though we have broken this thing down when this happened 2 weeks ago, the interactions, we can go through this as if it's not public information.
Mm-hmm. You literally have a Google Doc called the Nick Nurse Files.
We have a Google Doc called the Nick Nurse Files, and we'll see if he gets released because the files will get released. But, like, you know, like that all took place. Mm-hmm. So in his telling of the situation, you know, apparently we were peppering him and we were creating this narrative around the team that it distracted from the roster. So Nick was just trying to do what's best for the organization, of course. Yeah. Unless reporters actually push back on this.
Well, so the exchange continued, and it started with Mike Anter, the Toronto Sun, basically asking Nick if he thought the comments that he made in Philadelphia had backfired, and this approach had backfired. So here's the exchange.
Do you think that backfired?
No.
Because, I mean, you kind of opened the door to all the questions.
I did, or you guys did?
On Friday in Philadelphia,
yeah.
When you brought it up like that, it opened the door to a lot of this stuff. I'm just wondering, do you regret that?
Not at all. I mean, I think the door got opened weeks before, right?
Good. Because I don't think anyone here asked you specifically about your future. And
well, was it being reported or not being reported? My future.
There was one story, as far as I know. And, you know, I don't know if that subject had ever been raised prior to that. And I think that instance in Philly, I think it was a pretty general question. Like, I know the person who asked it, I asked them about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the way you answered it was, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but it kind of allowed some interpretations in terms of, you know, you've been here for a long time, you've been to reflect about your relationship with the front office. Like, you know, it would have been.
Well, my stance on my relationship with the front office is what I just said earlier. Like, Masai really wants to win. I really want to win. We're driving to try to figure out how to get back to a championship level, right? I think, again, our communication is open and honest with each other. I think that's all that I can say there.
By the way, it's so funny because we actually, as part of the live show, we even did a segment with Bobby Webster about essentially PR training, about how to get Bobby better at the PR aspect of it. And one of the examples we use was anytime you get asked a hard question, you can use the Masai approach and start talking about winning, and the focus is on winning. And you just notice right there, the whole conversation was about Nick and his comments about his future, and all of a sudden that conversation shifted because Nick started talking about winning. It's a slick move, man. I gotta say, if you're not in the press conferences all the time, you wouldn't understand how this game works. But
yeah, so that was Michael Grange in the second part of it. Mike Anter had asked the initial question in that exchange. I think it's just, for me, like, I don't have a problem with Nick looking towards, what his job security is beyond his contract for next season and looking at other opportunities. It's just that in this particular scenario, this narrative and this storyline was really just not brought to the forefront until he did. That's it.
We've done this before, but
like,
again, like, he wasn't put on the spot on any of the days leading up to it. One story came out. It was asked generally, hey, your season's been up and down. Where's your head at? And he took it in that direction. And now he's saying that was to distract from the team. But obviously, again, like, how do you think the reaction in the locker room was? We're never going to get the players to say on record, like, hey, we were all pissed about it. But, like, what do you think happened in that locker room when that happened?
No, for sure. And, generally, Nick talked about...
okay, yeah, sure.
No, Nick talked about the state of the team. He was asked about the team's selfish play and, like, kind of what else they need on the roster. He talked about them having to work on fixing the transition defense during the season, needing more bench production, running the half-court offense better, etc. He was also asked if he believes that his message is still getting through, and then he said yes.
What's he supposed to say?
I know, but that's my question for you, is that him talking about the team moving forward and him addressing his future, like, does it change, like, based on what you heard from him today? Like, does it change in terms of what you think is going to happen between Nick Nurse and the Raptors?
What he said today?
No, like, based on what you heard from him today, do you think Nick Nurse is going to be back as a head coach next season?
I mean, I don't think so, but I think that no one really knows what Masai is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a huge caveat that we have to put into this. Like, you and I might hear things, but we have not heard it directly from Masai in a complete moment of honesty. We have not, even Bobby in this case, which, by the way, Bobby does not make that decision. So this would be Masai. So, but even, like, we haven't heard that from Bobby. We haven't heard it from Nick Nurse in a moment of true honesty that he is going to move on or that he wants to move on. So again, like, all this has to be couched with those statements. And I'm not really sure about the reporting aspect of all of this, but, like, I'm sure that it'll be difficult to get a clear answer out of them, even if they wanted to inform these reports in the first place. So again, all of this is secondhand. So I don't want to say that, like, this is a thing locked in stone, because no one would really know that. I'm not even sure Masai knows that. I think he's going to sit down, interact with Nick. Nick was carrying out the season-ending meetings that he does with the players as they leave to go on their way, and so you got to go through that process. You got to go through that process with the front office. The front office got to check in with Nick, and they make a decision together, right? But at the same time, what I just didn't like, my whole issue with this whole process, like you said, I don't really mind if someone wants to look out for their future and figure out where they're going to go next. What I do mind is, it was at the right time for it. Was that the right approach? Did that tangibly help the Raptors when he came out and said that before that Philly game where they lost, right? And did that help the Raptors in the rest of the season? Is it helpful that this has become a huge talking point, right? The Toronto media isn't even that aggressive with anything except maybe the Maple Leafs. So, like, we're not here every single day trying to hold this man's feet to the fire. But you see the
Otto Porter just heard feet. No,
sorry, no, it's fine. He's fine. He's on 9 toes.
This guy's the Raptors media of feet.
Oh, man. But like, that's not what happens here. But at the same time, he chose that direction. I don't think it really helped anybody other than him in his reputation, that scenario. And ultimately, when we're looking back on the season, like, this is something that's going to be questioned. And so my whole thing is, don't, like, play it one way and then say it's the other way. Like, it's not that hard to sort of track some of these things out. And I think the other aspect too is just, like, it's not like there's been unhappy, 5 years as head coach or 10 years as in the organization. It's been a very happy time, a very successful time. He is the best winning percentage in Raptors history. He's the only championship in the Raptors history. He's helped the Raptors to many great heights. Even when he was an assistant, that year Dwayne Casey won Coach of the Year, Nick Nurse had a huge part to play in that. He's a phenomenal coach. He's a very, very, smart man. He's got a lot of smart schemes, and honestly, in the scope of history, he's going to be very well remembered in Toronto. But, like, it's not like there's nothing left here. So, like, even if you are going to exit, can we exit in a peaceful way or in, like, a smooth way, right? So, yeah, that's all. That's all I'm trying to say, man.
Yeah, and some of the players were also asked about, Nick Nurse's comments and his future with the team. And, he was endorsed by Scotty, who says he loves playing for Nick and he allows him to play freely. Fred said he'd be surprised if Nick wasn't back next year. OG said that Nick's a great coach.
But again, what are they supposed to say?
No, but this is all I'm saying.
They're going to come up and be like, yeah, actually, I would like to see that.
I'm just providing the information.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Pascal said, quote, he's a huge part of who I am as a player. I don't know what the future holds. I try to focus on the present and what's here right now.
Back when Dwayne Casey was like, Pascal, go over there, run, rebound, and give up the ball. Like, it was Nick Nurse who saw that Pascal had all these point forward qualities and was pushing Dwayne to even bring those forward in the first place. He deserves a lot of credit, which again, like this should be even if it is a split, like it should be a happy split.
Yeah, I think
this doesn't got to be a messy divorce, man.
I think above all the PR stuff and like how this messaging has been communicated, I think the one thing, at least for me, is like, listen, I think we're both in agreement that Nick is a great coach. And for me, the decision is just that, is Nick the right coach for this team? And I think Nick's gonna weigh that as well. And that's why he would say what is best for the organization. So I think that's the big decision.
Yeah.
That, like you mentioned, Nick, Masai, Bobby, all these guys have to sit down. But thinking about the summer ahead, like I think this is the first domino that has to fall, right? Before draft, free agency, any of that stuff. Before you start thinking about roster construction, there has to be a clear answer on who the head coach is next season.
Yeah, no, it's a huge part of this job. Like it's a leadership position. It's a position that I do feel like the Raptors, honestly, more likely they're gonna not change the roster that dramatically. This is my guess at the whole situation. But I do feel like with the right coach or with the right buy-in, I think you can get better results from this group.
Yeah.
So, that's a key decision. And obviously there's tons with the roster. We will talk about that tomorrow. We only have 1 hour today. So
we couldn't get to the CBA? You don't want to talk about the
there were some
new
CBA
in-season
questions in the room and it kind of scared me like DR DeRozan. But like, yeah, we will talk more about the players aspect tomorrow.
Yes.
There's so much to clean up on here, but we will continue to unpack this season. But for now, I've been your host, Willow, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Please continue to rate, review, subscribe to the program. We'll continue talking about the Raptors, and obviously when the Raptors are done, which they are now, we will then transition to talking about the rest of the NBA playoffs. But yeah, thanks to producer and co-host Alex Wong, our board producer Derek Brandell, and Jennifer Rolner for helping on the YouTube stream. See you tomorrow.